All right, guys, it gives me a great pleasure today to bring somebody to you guys. Peter Kazazes, he is a good friend of the Teen Center. He's also a prior president of the Teen Board, as many of you guys are familiar with. And he's here today to talk about his ventures in social media. He's also a well-renowned CNN commentator.
Fox.
He is also a well-renowned Fox business commentator. He is also a well-renowned Fox business commentator. And he is here with us today. Please welcome Peter Kazazes.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be back at Arch Street.
I want to talk about what you did first because, of course, everyone in the room knows what you did. But tell us what you did, then we're going to backpedal and we're going to talk about how you got there, where you are today, and where you're headed. So tell us exactly what you did a few years ago.
It's more of what I do now because I still do the same thing. But it all started out in 2011 when I was working for a bunch of different companies on a contractual 2-month basis. And it was a slow period. Everything had pretty much finished up. It was around Christmas time. And I was writing a sentiment analysis algorithm for fun because it's a relatively underexplored area of computer science that not a lot of people have touched. And that's something I was really interested from the get-go. And I was looking to push out and make something novel in the computer science area that was kind of a low-hanging fruit that hadn't been done before. And sentiment analysis was definitely one of them, especially sentiment analysis combined with big data sets like Twitter. So that's what I started doing is I wrote this sentiment analysis algorithm. It worked a lot better than everything else that was already out there. And I hooked it up with Twitter and started analyzing whatever I could with it. My first idea was predicting movie releases, the week of movie releases, because it was around Christmas time. And you could definitely tell how good a movie was going to do on a relative basis compared to other movies around the same time. And then the next idea, obviously, was political elections. And that was during the Republican primaries. And I started tracking the Republicans who were getting suited up for the 2012 presidential election, the presidential primaries for the Republican Party. And it worked really, really well. And that's how things started going. And at that point, everything was still on my computer. I hadn't shown anyone anything. So over the course of the next 3 weeks, I took all of that crazy math mumbo jumbo and compressed it all down into something that was pretty easy for anyone to understand. I basically took those numbers and I turned it into the style of a regular poll. And that was called Twi'lect, and that was kind of the big bombshell moment here that took everything mainstream. And Twi'lect was a pretty big deal. I mean, it predicted the presidential election within 0.75% and followed and tracked every other major poll in the US just using social media, which is in and of itself a big feat. But the fact that it worked at the end of the day is the coolest part about it. So after Twi'lect was done and the election was over, I took the algorithm and the system that I built to capture all the tweets and I wrapped it up into a company called Sybil Vision, where I still work today. And we work with social media companies, entertainment companies, pretty much anyone who has a lot of activity in social media, and tell them how their brand is doing. We do market research. We work with financial professionals to predict earnings and things like that. And it's based all on the same. So little has changed since what I wrote in 2011. It's basically just tweaking the parameters and tweaking what you're searching. And it's more or less the same thing.
And how old were you in 2011?
16.
Okay, so you're 16 years old and you're sitting at home, and this idea came from where?
It was more or less a culmination of, at that point I'd been working for different big companies. I worked for Accenture for a while. I worked with a bunch of pharmaceutical companies. And I was tired of working for other people, and I really wanted to do my own thing. And sentiment analysis is a notoriously underperforming part of computer science. Like in the accuracy before, in the past 2 years, the accuracies have gone up into the high 80s and low 90%. But before that, the average, especially on smaller texts like tweets and whatnot, was more in the high 60s, low 70s. So it was really, to be honest, a low-hanging fruit, something I could just grab and run with. So I read the research. I read a lot of the academic publications at the time around sentiment analysis were coming out of Stanford. So I took that stuff and I just turned it into a real-world solution.
But where did the education at 16 come from to know how to do that and to know that that was even possible at your age to do something so unbelievably world-renowned, because when you're 16, that's not the typical thing that most 16-year-olds are doing. So where did that educational process come from?
It was a lot of self-education. A ton of it came from just spending way too much time on computers, like a ridiculous amount of time on computers. And I never played video games. I never wasted my time on a computer. I was always doing something. It was either, if it wasn't programming, it was network security related. If it wasn't network security related, I was messing with someone else's computer. If I wasn't messing with someone else's computer, I don't know what else I was doing. But it all added up into that ability at that point, which I don't want to call it that because it really wasn't anything that crazy. I didn't do anything that required a PhD. It was just organizing my thoughts and organizing what at the time was my talent and what I liked to do, and just really focusing it and figuring out how to push the envelope in the right direction, and get to that genesis point of doing something that no one's really done before.
So it's more or less for you, in your specific journey with this, you're self-taught?
Almost entirely. I mean, Brunswick definitely helped a lot. My teachers helped in a bunch of little different ways. And there's no big computer science program at Brunswick, but my math teachers helped me a lot. And I got help from the English department at Brunswick for some of the more heavy literature-based stuff that I was doing, like breaking out sentences and stuff like that. So Brunswick helped me a little bit, but the resources that are available to you online, especially now in 2014, are just ridiculous. I mean, you can learn any skill that you need to learn on a collegiate and even post-grad level at this point, just by finding the right resources online.
And was the timing with the presidential election coincidental to you creating this and the presidential election being then? And it was like, okay, this makes sense to focus on this right now with how it's trending and let's go in that direction? Or was that something that you created as the idea that you wanted to track that election?
I've always been heavily interested in politics. I've always followed politics. But no, I didn't create the algorithm. I didn't create Sybil Vision because of the election. Politics was again the low-hanging fruit that I could just grab and prove this stuff worked with.
And then when you talk about yourself at Brunswick, were you a good student?
Probably not by most people's standards. I did well. I mean, I graduated with honors, but I definitely sacrificed some academic work to get extracurricular activities done.
And was it something when you look back that you feel like that do you regret the path that you took, or you completely, this is your life passion and you love every day of your work?
Not at all, and that's definitely something that I've learned to hone over the years, is where do I have to sacrifice in someone else's eyes? It may not be the right place to sacrifice in, but in the long run, it's really helped me get on this path of just continuing day after day, setting goals for the day, doing my goals for the day, and knowing what my priorities are and not comparing them against really anyone else's rubric. I mean, obviously at Brunswick, I was never gonna do horribly. I was never gonna fail, but I skirted by with what I was capable of doing, and obviously spent a significant chunk of my time elsewhere.
And where was elsewhere?
It was working digitally and doing this stuff. As I mentioned, I was working with a bunch of companies even prior to junior year, and that took up a lot of time. I mean, I wasn't going to bed before really 1 a.m. until forever. So that's what I spent my time doing, and that's where that education happened. I mean, I guess I sacrificed my traditional education for that alternative education.
And then once you took this idea to reality and you took the concept and you created it and it was out there and people were recognizing that you had created this, how did you go from 16-year-old Greenwich, Connecticut student to basically world-renowned news commentator who's now predicting the outcome of the election?
It was a quick process. It really happened the drop of a hat, literally. I was contacted within 2 weeks of Twilect being out there. I published, there was a way to access the technical numbers behind my data so that you could basically verify that what I was doing was real and I wasn't just taking the regular polls and just mimicking them and saying this is based on Twitter. So when a couple of people had crunched through that data, it became clear that there was actually some significant work going on here, and Fox Business reached out within 3 weeks of me releasing Twilect, and that's how that all got started.
Because they recognized this how? Where did they see this?
It was written up pretty quickly. I don't remember the publications exactly, but it was definitely well covered at the time. It was in the local paper. It was in the Greenwich Time, and then it was just a cycle of different media sources after that, and eventually Fox got wind of it.
When you think of social media now and where we are in 2015 and where we were in 2005, for example, do you feel that we have, are we still tapping into where we're headed with this, or are we basically going to start to see it descend in this phenomenon, in this trend, or is it something that's going to continue to climb to even be even more so than we're seeing, or what are your thoughts on what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years?
I kind of have like a two-pronged opinion on that. I think that every day that goes by, I mean, there's probably 50 microphones in this room, and people are just figuring out how to access that data and figure out what to do with it. And every day that changes, and these new networks are popping up, and people are adding sensors to their wrists and running around with Fitbits and stuff like that, and comparing their caloric intake to their Starbucks buddies' caloric intake, and that stuff's only just beginning. And I really think that that's going to take off in a way that may be good, it may be bad, it may help us realize something about ourselves, it may not. But I think the amount of sensors that we're adding to our life are really going to change the way social media is thought of, and turn it into more of like a engrossing life media kind of thing. For better or for worse, I try to avoid stuff like that. I don't want my life online, and because I've seen what you can do with that data. You can make crazy generalizations about people. I can tell I can tell what a lot of people's eating habits are. I can talk about you can tell very ridiculously easily where someone lives just based on using your Instagram. Probably has 50 photos taken in your own house, and that stuff is definitely out there for public consumption. So is it going to increase? Yes, because there's financial incentive too. People make money off of this data. You can trade on this data. It's been proven before. People have used my tools to trade on this data. So if there's money to be made, the networks are going to continue to be built out, and they are being built out. Whether or not that's a good thing is another conversation.
Where do you see your company in that same time span, 5 to 10 years?
We're trying to pivot a little bit and move away from the media entertainment space into the cybersecurity, defense, threat analysis space. So we're trying to go towards a defense angle, which is obviously a really hot topic right now because of the Sony hacking and various other things, ISIS, a bunch of other stuff. But that's not why we're doing it. I think that in terms of public utility, that's the best place for us to work. I can tell you how many singles someone's going to sell on their next album, but I don't think that really helps the world as much as being able to predict or write up a threat model based on how people are talking on social media.
And when you say you can tell that why? You can tell that because
we build a corpus of, so we'll take an artist's last release, like we'll take Beyonce's last album release, and we'll analyze, and we'll dredge back historic analysis of the traffic conversation that happened then. And we're not talking about like 5 years ago, we're talking about like 18 months ago. And we'll compare a single release that was released before that album to a single release on the next album that hasn't even come out yet. And you can compare the traffic and the hype around each single, and then extrapolate from there as those singles continue to be released, what the buzz is and what the general sentiment level. That's also something I haven't talked about. So that sentiment is really important for all of this stuff. You can identify, I could talk about this all day, but we can tell on a very specific level how people are talking about the things that they are talking about. So if you tweet about that album, about that release, we can break down what you said into a bunch of different characteristics and basically put you in a bucket, and then compare the size of those buckets, and do a pretty good job of telling how well something's going to sell.
So when Taylor Swift's album came out, right? If I had tweeted 6 months before that, can't wait to get the new album, and then you had been assigned to that account or to that album, would you basically go back into the history of my tweets or anyone who had tweeted Taylor Swift and sort of look at the incentive for the future of that tweet?
So I like doing stuff in real time because it makes me focus on what's happening right now, but we do historic analyses as well. But yeah, that's exactly how it works. We either start the collection now or yesterday, or we can dredge back through history before we started tracking. And basically build a profile up about any topic we want. yeah, go from there.
And as far as this as a career, is this something that you are very happy with yourself that you went in this direction? Or when you look back, are you like, you know what, there was a time when I would have maybe have went in this direction, but I didn't, but I'm so into this pond now that I'm going to stay here and I'm going to make the best of it and I'm going to continue to thrive here? Or are you completely just content with every day of your life?
I am 100% happy. I'm obviously not in school right now, which at the time was a really hard decision to make. I was at UCLA for a semester and I absolutely loved it. But there was just no way I could keep saying no to the opportunity that was calling me back in New York, that I had to keep working on this. So I left UCLA, I came back to New York. I live in New York now. And no, I love every second of it.
I heard, and you can clarify if this rumor is true, I heard that in your dorm, you basically shut the internet down because you were running your business out of your dorm.
That could not be more farther from truth. UCLA has like one of the second or third fastest internet of any college campus in the country. Georgia Tech is the first. I don't remember why I know that. No.
No. So you didn't make any enemies by taking over.
I think you made that up.
No, I heard it like that. I didn't make that up. But, Peter and I go way back because he was obviously the president of the student board here, and I got to know him very well, and I am still know him very well. Consider him a friend, and he hung out here a lot, and he was president of the board, and he was also involved in a lot of the community service efforts and so forth. And that being said, when you look back at the history, it blows my mind when I sort of, I was telling Felipe, I was kind of joking, because I think the last image I have of you is when you were hopping around in like a Santa Claus hat in here, because it was like the Christmas dance, and that was the theme. And then you've gone from being like this 16-year-old to this obviously adult who is unbelievably successful. And when you look at that, and when you feel, when you look back, I know that there's some people that when they get to be as successful as you are, they look back and they think, okay, there was this one moment that was a game changer for me, and maybe if it hadn't been for that one moment, I wouldn't be here. Are there any of those moments in your life that you look back and you think, okay, this one moment pretty much helped me go in this direction, or this incident, or meeting this person, because they always kind of say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And is there any truth to that in your story of your success?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, the first time I was on Fox Business really solidified that whole thing. I was so nervous going into it, like ridiculously. I was so close to throwing up all this stuff. And I did it, and I was told that I did really well at it, and it gave me this confidence. It just was like, this is what I need to do. People were patting me on the back for days after that, and I was just saying, I need to drill down, focus on this for as long as it takes to turn this into something really successful.
Any other questions, guys, before we wrap up with Peter? Yes, sir.
Can you talk about more what you do in the defense area? Like you were talking about how when Sony got attacked, how that whole cyber attack stuff is kind of showing up more and more. What could your company specifically do in your algorithm to prevent things like that from happening, or detect them, or things like that?
So the guys doing all these hacks, believe it or not, are mostly under the age of 25. A lot of them are under the age of 20, and a lot of them aren't really that smart. So what they're doing is they're breaking into these companies, and they have to tell everyone as soon as they do it. So it's really, really, really easy to detect these attacks on social media, because recently the Lizard Squad, they took down PlayStation Network and Xbox Live over Christmas. That was kind of a high-profile incident. And people like that, they love to tell other people that they're breaking these public systems. And it's pretty easy to detect, especially because a lot of people are affected by them. So when these people do start to talk, a lot of people perk up. So if we can catch those conversations, and one Lizard Squad Johnny telling Lizard Squad Bill, haha, don't go on Xbox Live tomorrow, winky face. We can find those people, and that's not only detection, that's also attribution. So we can, after the hack happens and the main Lizard Squad account is saying, we just hacked Xbox Live, we can say that was Johnny and Bill, or Bob, whatever I said, which is a huge win, which isn't really possible unless you're doing this constant collection, and that's something that we do.
Have you met these people?
No.
And where did the Lizard Squad hang out? Where are these people?
A bunch of them got arrested in England just now because of a security researcher named John Krebs. Did a very, very, very well thought out and well done analysis of a bunch of Lizard Squad websites and stuff like that. So there are a bunch of like 16-year-old kids in England, and I'm sure they're scattered all over the world the same way all these little cyber hacking organizations are.
Do you feel that we are better as a society because of all of the social networking media, or do you feel that we have taken a step back when it comes to the human being?
Social media platforms are definitely a platform for change if you use them the right way. They're also an amazing platform for vanity if that's the kind of person that you are. So it really depends on how you approach them and how you use them, much like anything else. You can use a car to kill someone, but you can also use it to be an ambulance. So it's a lot like that, in that it just depends on how you want to use the tool that you're using. And I think that a lot of people who don't really, especially younger people who are still in school, who are figuring out what their passions are, really, it's a lot easier to go towards that way of vanity, and use social media as like a way to one-up other people, which is definitely dangerous. And there's measurable, especially in the bullying area and stuff like that, there's measurable impacts that these people who are really negative and rude and mean and horrible on social media, they definitely ruin lives. But I think at the same time, there's also a lot of social justice issues and social awareness issues that get a lot more light because of social media and their prevalence on the internet. And I think that social media is a great distribution platform for those kind of issues.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to wrap up with, or any thing that you feel like we missed that we need to conclude this with?
Not really. Arch Street is a great place. Obviously, you guys love it here. I loved it here. I had way too much fun in this room. Yeah, I mean, keep doing what you. I'm lucky. I'm really lucky because what I'm good at and what I like to do are the same thing. So you guys all have to find what you're good at and what you like to do, and just turn it into this awesome synergistic equation, which is kind of what I've done, and just turn it into something huge and push the envelope until you do that novel thing, and I promise it'll take off. And that's the best way to do it, and it's really not that difficult when you give it the time. So that's my advice to you guys.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Good to see you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.